with me today I have Magnus Corfitsen, the CEO of Ascelia Pharma. The agenda for today is, first of all, Magnus will take us through the Q4, and after that we will have a couple of questions. So with that said, Magnus, welcome. Nice to see you.
Likewise, Claus.
So could you please take us through your latest report, the Q4 report, with the highlights?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Friday, February 10, we released our Q4 report for 2022. That was a quarter with significant events, and we continue to make progress, which is in particular emphasizing on completing the ongoing phase 3 clinical trial and preparing the company and getting ready for Orviglance launch. So in the fourth quarter, you would say the most significant event was the communication in beginning of December, when we announced our decision to change the target for the phase 3 study to 80 patients in total. Originally, we had planned the phase 3 study to have 200 patients based on the best estimates we had back at the time. But in parallel with the phase 3 trial, we have done a number of things, one of which was taking all the medical images from a phase 2 study that we had completed earlier, and evaluated with the same methodology, same parameters as we are doing in the phase 3 trial. So essentially, we took a look at the phase 2 trial and said, if we measure exactly the same way as we're doing in the phase 3 trial, how good were we in the phase 2 trial? And this trial was in 20 patients, so significantly smaller, but nevertheless, the information was very interesting. This has been some of the data has been presented at medical conferences, but what we looked very closely into was the effect on what is the primary endpoint in the phase 3 trial. On that parameter, measured in the same way as we do in the phase 3 trial, 20 patients, we demonstrated that Orviglance was statistically significantly better than an unenhanced MRI, so the same comparator. So with 20 patients, we proved that Orviglance was superior. Then we reflected with Sparkle being 200 patients, that is significantly overpowering the study. And especially given our difficulties to enroll patients during COVID, and it is an orphan drug, so it's difficult to find patients in the first place for a clinical trial. We first of all validated this information, double-checked, triple-checked, to understand, could it really be that Orviglance is that effectful? And it turned out it was. And then we had a dialogue with the FDA, which takes obviously some time, because you need to prepare, you need to ask for a meeting months in advance and prepare a full, you could say, dossier for the conversation. And once we received the feedback from the FDA, we decided to complete Sparkle with 80 patients instead of just 200. And that is driven by a much, much stronger effect with Orviglance than what we anticipated when we planned the study originally. So that, I think, was by far the most essential event in the quarter.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks a lot for clarifying that, because there could be some misinterpretation of the message you sent out just before Christmas. So it's really good you clarified that now, and you do that as well in your Q4 report after this very intense year. And you mentioned briefly, Magnus, that you experience delays in the public system, and I don't think you're the only company experiencing that post-COVID. Could you elaborate a little on that? What do you see? And now you only have 9 patients left to finish the enrollment, but can you elaborate a little on what you see in the system for the moment?
Yeah, I think it has been, we started the study in beginning of 2020, just before COVID, and it requires a lot of effort to start up a study, negotiate the contract with the hospitals, motivate the investigators and the study coordinators and sub-investigators and the whole team at the hospital, spend a lot of time also to do training and in the protocol and everything. And then once we were on the brink, had a lot of momentum, then COVID came and everything shut down. And some sites actually were closed for a very long period of time, and some of them we were never able to sort of really open for enrollment. So they have been closed. But I think COVID has a lot of different impact, and one is when it was emergency situation with hospitals being crowded. Obviously, clinical trials was significantly reduced. Also, medical imaging in general was significantly less volume. That is everything non-COVID related. So if you look at the number of cancer diagnoses during COVID 2020-21, the frequency of cancer, or the number of cancer diagnoses, is substantially smaller than previous years, because diagnosis of cancer was just not prioritized, or people were afraid to go to the hospitals, or hospitals were unable to, you could say, accommodate the demand, because the protocols were updated. We all knew it when we went shopping. We had to clean our hands before going into a store. And if a patient had been in the scanner in the hospital, they would actually need, the protocol said that they needed to clean with ethanol, clean the entire scanner. And if you think about what is important in radiology and practice, it is throughput, keep the scanner going as much as possible. But if you, after each scan, you may include a, let's say, 15-20 minute slot after each scan to clean the scanner and the room, maybe even longer. Some places, you reduce productivity by maybe 50%. And then adding time for clinical trial is difficult. So I think this is something we've seen. It's something that a lot of other people have seen. I think also the Great Resignation, in the sense that people were trying to find maybe a different purpose in life and resigned, has led to a lot of hospitals being short of staff. Many of them had very, very intense work schedules during when a lot of patients were in the hospitals, and they wanted to do something else. And that has caused some sites to say, we don't have a study coordinator and we are unable to recruit one, so we pause enrollment in these activities. We've heard hospitals who say we eliminate X% of the studies that we're participating in because we're short of staff. And that's you could say, hospital management decision. So I think very broadly, it has had tremendous impact on clinical research and also on our phase 3 study.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for clarifying that. So if we go back to the Orviglance study, because when you designed the study back in the days and you were in dialogue with FDA, they put up 3 parameters that you should fulfill to make an application for the FDA. Now you successfully finished 2 of them, and you're very close on finishing the last one. So you had the efficacy study with Orviglance versus gadolinium with very good results, and you also showed in your food efficiency study that you can even you can have a light meal. You don't need to fast compared to what's on the market today. So
the fasting was more related to Orviglance, because Orviglance is powder you mix in a glass of water, and when patients are fasting, then we know if they're fasting, then there's no food to sort of interact with the absorption into the liver. So that's what we do in the phase 3 trial and have done in other trials, because then we know for sure that nothing interferes. But what we tested in the food effect was if people could have sort of a light meal, typically that would be a light breakfast, then it actually appears not to there's interfere. So there's still significant imaging enhancement after a light meal.
Yeah, well, that's good with some possibilities in the sense of fasting or light meal or whatever. So you got very good results from the two first studies, and now within a month and a half, you will finish your enrollment. And what then?
Yeah, so we had at the end of January we had 71. We send out at the end of each month, we send out an update on how many patients have come in, and we will announce once we reach 80 evaluable completed patients. So after the patient have been scanned, we make sure that images are uploaded, and we do a quality check that the patient is actually evaluable. Because if the images are not, you could say, if we don't have all the required images, then the patient will not count towards the 80. So once we have the 80 patients, we will stop enrolling any more patients. And then once we have all the images, then 3 independent radiologists will evaluate all the images. So we're doing several batches. So not taking all the images of the 80 patients in one go. We have actually done the first batch, and then but obviously we're focusing on the last batch because that is when we have the last image read. That is, you could say, the goal for the next step, which is the you could say statistical analysis, also quality check and validation of the data and everything. So we are as sure as we can be that once we present the data, or once we have the conclusions, that it's actually true and accurate. So the reading will happen, and again, what we did with the gadolinium study earlier on is 3 readers and actually a 4th radiologist for the lesion matching, but that's more of a technical thing. 3 readers evaluating, and then the results go into the reading database, and that's where the statisticians will do their analysis, and then we can announce it in the middle of this year.
Yeah, and then you are more or less ready to submit for the FDA.
Yeah, well, you could say it's a super important milestone for getting ready to submission. So typically, when you have a study, we have the headline results, which is the first element, which is obviously the most important one, the primary endpoint. But there is a lot of other analysis we need to do that comes into a complete study report that typically takes a number of months after you have the headline results.
Of course.
Then before you submit, we have not communicated anything on that, but many companies typically have a pre-submission meeting, at least one, where they discuss with the FDA and tell them this is how we're going to structure our new drug application, the NDA filing, and then they get the feedback from FDA, because you want to make sure that the approach, as a company, you want to make sure the approach and the application is in a format and along the lines in a way that FDA wants it to be. And many times you can slice and dice the data in various ways. I think it's prudent to have that conversation with the FDA and make sure you are on the right track.
Yeah, by that said, you gain a lot of time. On the other hand, you risk something if you don't do it like that. So
yeah, exactly.
That's a very good approach.
Yeah.
Of course. Magnus, just to take the next question about your liquidity situation and the things you mentioned in your Q4 report, because you have loads of cash right now, but of course the closer you come to possible approval, you probably need to look into the financial markets again. But with the cash you have in the bank right now, how far can you take the company, and what are you going to use the money for?
Yeah, so we had at the end of Q4 we had 150 million in the bank, and that will take us with, you would say, the prioritized activities into Q4 this year. So obviously the financial runway is shorter than it used to be. On the other hand, we have a number of very important milestones that I think will create value for shareholders during this year.
Of course.
So as a biotech company, you always need to consider how do you ensure a strong balance sheet, like most other companies do, and that is something that we also evaluate, right? So and to strengthen the balance sheet would also be, you could say, historically we have raised money from investors, but that could be other sources of capital that could strengthen our balance sheet. So we're evaluating what is in the best interest of our shareholders, and that is the priority we have.
Yeah, of course. Have you mentioned anything about what if you get, when you get the approval, not if, but when you get the approval, are you going to partnering on Orviglance? Are you going to sell it yourself? Is this a little too early to mention something about? Because this also, with that said, you also get a good impression of, the cash you have on your balance sheet. Is that sufficient? As you mentioned, it's probably not, but maybe you need less cash because then you have a okay from FDA.
Yeah, so our plan is to when we take Orviglance, which is a first-in-class orphan drug status, the only product that targets a $500 to $600 million addressable market in US, Europe, and Japan. We want to launch it with an Ascelia team in the US. That will be around 40 people at the time of launch. And we think we can penetrate the majority of the US market with that kind of organization. In other geographies, we want to partner with companies that are, you could say, already have the commercial infrastructure, so we don't need to invest in that. I think for us, being a small company, it's always essential to understand where can we get, you would say, most bang for the buck or the biggest impact. And for us, that is by being successful in US, because that's by far the biggest market. But as mentioned, in other geographies, we want to partner with companies to allow them to focus on those activities.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Magnus. And I don't have further questions. I think we went through in a nice way of your very intense 2022, and also got some more flavor on your thoughts about delays in the public system, sufficient funds, and so on and so forth. So with that said, Magnus, thanks a lot for participating in this offline event.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Claus. It was good to give you an update on Ascelia and sort of our very bright outlook for 2023, which is truly going to be a remarkable year and hopefully a very successful year for Ascelia Pharma.
Yeah, we hope so, for sure.
Yeah.